How do you cure CWD? The answer to that is simple. You don't. I'm not going to cure it. You're not going to cure it. They're not going to cure it. There isn't a cure for it. What it is it's simply the largest scare tactic that's ever propagated across the United States in our industry since our industry's conception. That's what CWD is. It's a massive scare tactic that has created so much interest in propaganda that has allowed itself to be the greatest form of funding for research and additional jobs and the ability to create new vaccines or programs to place on the backs of landowners to have to pay for and adhere to. It's the greatest thing that funding has ever seen when it comes in a way of the deer species. 1967 is when they found the first case in a wild deer, might I add. And what has happened to our deer population since 1967? That answer is pretty easy to find also. It's exploded exponentially. Far more deer today than there ever were in 1967. We have to remove ourselves to truly find how this is working. We have to remove ourselves and our passions, whether that's deer hunting, whether that's deer breeding, whether that's wildlife conservation, whatever it is, remove that from your train of thought and figure out what's really going on. And the answer is simply politics. Just like everything else we've seen. I'm sure some of you remember not too long ago that to stop another form of disease, we had to stay inside and take our vaccines. Same situation is going on here. Tons of funding happened for the other one. Tons of research was done on the other one. Tons of new vaccines and programs were put in place on the other one. Lo and behold, we're still here. Now, I've yet to see, unlike the other one, I've yet to see an example, and this is my 19th year in the business. I've dedicated my entire life to the hunting industry. I've yet to see an example personally or from a friend that could prove this deer died by way of CWD. If it's biological or that type of research that we're unable to find at the current time, I would call BS on that too. Because there are multiple examples across the board of people that have done their own research or hired private parties to do research and come up with, very smart people might I add, and have come up with documentation saying it's not as bad as we're making it out to be. Matter of fact, it's a lot like some of the other diseases in other industries that we've already fixed. The time frame that it would take to kill a deer is far greater than what the average lifespan of the deer are in the wild or in captivity while being hunted. The amount of time that it takes CWD or would take CWD to actually kill a deer or maim a deer or make a deer unable to live its normal everyday life is far greater than what it takes a coyote or a bobcat or a mountain lion to run out and grab one, or a car driving down the highway to run one over. There's also a few other diseases that have gone through our deer herd that have been far more detrimental. Once contracted, it's almost guaranteed death, and it's not pretty. And the research and the scare and the funding that all came out for that is minuscule in comparison to CWD, which we can't find proof that it's detrimentally killing our deer herds. Takes me back to my original train of thought is it's the politics behind it. Just like you see in everything else in America. Side A has created or gathered a massive amount of funding, funded some entity, and put their agenda into the head of that entity. Now that entity uses that money to fund the research for the agenda from Group A, and somehow is able to convince the American public that it's all on the up and up. However, it would be very easy when looking at it from that point of view to say that if you came in with more funding as Group B, you came in with more funding than Group A put in and wanted the narrative to change, that you would probably see a pretty quick change in the narrative if your money outweighed Group A's money. That's how politics work. That's why you see the constant flip-flop of politicians' ideology through their entire careers. I'm sure you're thinking in your head, just like I am, multiple examples of where this politician said one thing on videotape in 1995, and in 2005 he said something different, and in 2015 he was back to the original one, and now in 2023 he's whatever side is giving him the money and pitching him the votes is the side that he's agreeing with. I feel strongly that it would be the same with CWD. Right now, there's more money to propagate the ideology that CWD is detrimental and is going to wipe out the deer herd. And we are trying so many things, whether it's standing our ground or fighting with our voices or fighting physically or to the point of, like I said earlier, hiring and getting great documentation from our own biologists to prove that this isn't happening. And it doesn't matter because the funding is telling them what to say. And until we change the funding and who the funding's coming from, the narrative will remain the same. I think it's a pretty easy solution here to see that they're not going to change the narrative of CWD, and they're not going to slack off on it unless the money that is paying for their research and paying for their positions has a separate agenda than what they're saying right now. Now, it would be tough to grab a group of guys and gals and go raise up the funding to change that narrative. Fortunately, we already do that. There's a strong way that you could take a stance, and I'm not saying to do this, but I'm giving an example, is that the Parks and Wildlife departments are majoritively funded by licensed sales, and through licensed sales is also how they generate their additional funding through acts such as the Pittman-Robertson Act. Those two sectors right there far outweigh the amount of funding that they are getting from groups with an agenda to push the CWD. If tomorrow everybody was to decide we're not purchasing a hunting license, that would be true detriment onto an entity because the majority of their funding would go away. And if your narrative was, we will begin purchasing license again once you lay off of this CWD scare, leave our deer breeders alone, leave our outfitters alone, leave our landowners alone, then I think you would see an actual change in the narrative. Or you could go a flip side and you could raise enough money to come back in there with millions of dollars to tell them, here's the research we found and we would like to give y'all this to start the research, and look into what it is that our findings. I think you would see a mass difference in the narrative there. But point being, let's not kid ourselves that this is an entity that's trying to do what's best for the wildlife. That's obviously not the situation. Common sense says that a deer population has exploded since the original finding of CWD in 1967 until now. The deer population has grown exponentially. We're harvesting bigger whitetail than we ever have. We're harvesting more healthy deer. We have more population than we ever have. Things are really good for the deer right now, in my state for sure. CWD is not wiping them out. The money, the funding, these deer breeders that are losing their animals left and right and basically getting shut down. Let's face it, you put your life savings into something, your whole world is in these deer pens, and the state comes in and depopulates, also known as slaughtering, your entire herd. There's no way to bounce back from that financially. they're being put out of business by way of propaganda and external funding. If we want it to go away, I think the simple solution is that we go find the funding to change the narrative, because all the biology in the world right now isn't working. So I'm not sure what else to say on the subject other than I think you follow the dollar, and it always leads you to the solution when you're dealing with something politically. That's my take. Leave a comment below if you agree or disagree. I'm more than happy to discuss the situation and find out any information that I don't already know. And if you're from Texas Parks and Wildlife or another entity that has the studies that can prove that this is killing our deer left and right, and that we have to shut these breeders down because the breeders are the ones causing it, even though it started in the wild to begin with, or that we can't feed deer at a feeder anymore because that's what's causing it, even though deer huddle around the same acorn tree to eat acorns in the wild. If you have proof that I'm on the wrong track thinking that this is political and it actually is scientific or biological, I would love to hear from you too. You guys have a great day, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.